Right, and welcome back. Is we're going to look at slightly more sophisticated systems now. It'll help some people. Um, the first points I want to make is that we all agree that you only need to do as much admin as your business requires and no more. But what you need to do is absolutely essential. So what I've already shown you will help most small businesses, but I'm going to just talk about a few extra features that include more than just the cost of sales to give you better reporting. The first one I'm going to bring up is what is called cost centers. A cost center is when you can separate your business into different physical parts. A very simple example of cost centers. Let's say you're in warehousing and distribution, and you're in a city. You might divide that city up into 4 quarters, and you've got a truck that runs to each one of those quarters. And then you've got a salesperson that's in charge of each one of those quarters. And you've got a person at your premises that is picking the items that need to be loaded onto the truck. What you've actually done is you've split your whole business up into 4 teams. And if you created each one of those teams as a cost center, you're not only allocating the cost of sales to each cost center, but you can also include the cost of the truck, the cost of the fuel. You can add all of the staff costs that are involved in each one of those cost centers. So you're comparing like for like. You compare which one of my cost centers is doing better than the other cost center. If a cost center is doing badly, why? Maybe that part of the city is not as good for your business as the other parts of the city, but it might be that whole team that's involved in that cost center that are not working very well. So your cost centers are really, you can use them to get a whole lot more information. Is the team as a whole doing their job properly? Are they making the gross profits that the other teams are making? You're getting so much information. It's such a good system to be able to use. But your business obviously has to be big enough to be able to start introducing cost centers. If you've only got one truck, it's not going to mean anything. And sometimes if you've got 2 or 3 trucks, they all go all over the place. You can't separate them. But in a situation where you can separate and keep it rigid, it really works well to help you, because it helps you to manage your business, because each transaction, each cost that you're putting through is you're allocating it to the specific cost center. And the sales that are coming in are being allocated to that cost center. So it's giving you so much more information to make business decisions. Now, we've also talked, another example, we've talked fairly extensively about this famous hardware store that we've got, and then we talked about setting up the different inventory groups, that you're comparing your sales with your cost of sales per inventory group, like your general building materials, your plumbing, your electrical, etc., etc., etc. But in a hardware store, you could take it one step further too, and you could also run cost centers in a hardware store, that your whole garden center is a cost center, your whole general building materials is a cost center. if your hardware store is big enough that you've got a person that's on the floor as the sales assistant just for the plumbing, and if you've got the same story just for the electrical side, etc., etc., you've got paint, you add all the things that you know. If you created cost centers in your hardware store, it's showing the cost of sales against the sales, but you also can allocate all of your labor costs to that cost center. You can, if it's possible, split your rent up of your premises. So what I'm trying to say to you is that you're adding more expenses just than the cost of sales. And it's really giving you information about how much money you are making out of each cost center. It's much more detailed information than just looking at the cost of sales. The second thing I want to raise is in most accounting systems, they'll have what they call a manufacturing module. But basically, it only works if you make the same thing over and over and over again. So in other words, it's almost like you've got a recipe of all of your components that are being put together to end up with the finished product. One of the things, if you work with manufacturing like this, is one of the biggest stories is, especially if you're buying your raw materials from a place like China, and it takes you your lead time, the time it takes you from actually placing the order to receiving the stock might be 6 months. And let's say if you were in the electrical business and you can only make things if you've got all of the raw materials, all of the components. You can't leave out some because you forgot about them. You really have to make sure that when you're placing an order for the components from China, it includes all of the components to make all of the finished products that you want to make. You can't forget anything out. And it's something I had many years ago, it's over 20 years ago, a little bit of a misunderstanding with a client. They thought I was saying yes, that you would get one list of components, making 20 different finished goods with different quantities of each finished good. But it could only provide, the system I was working with could only provide a list of components for each finished item. You had to sit and you had to add up between all of them. Sorry. It was a misunderstanding and I always felt bad afterwards. But it's something that was subsequently introduced by this particular accounting system. And if you are in that situation, it really pays you to make sure that it will add up all of the components for a series of different finished items. And when you're in a situation like that, I can guarantee you're going to check it manually yourself again, and then you're going to give it to a staff member to also check. It's just too critical to leave things out, because you will have 3/4 finished, half finished, whatever it was, things and you stuck, and it puts your business in a very bad situation. Another thing that you get in most accounting systems that work, small, medium-sized businesses, is job costing. The difference between job costing and manufacturing. So manufacturing, I said, is a recipe because you're making lots and lots and lots of the same items. Job costing is for one-off style manufacturing. And basically, when you're using job costing, you should be able to put in all of the costs that you can put to a particular job. And if you're doing this, it should actually, in essence, be printing out for you what is basically a profit and loss account for that one particular job. So it's very useful if you're in the sort of business where you're building big things, like you're building houses, or you might have teams that you send out to install roofs or gutters or plumbing on different building projects. Or you're manufacturing one-offs like boats. You get these big stainless steel tanks. I just call them tanks for like the breweries and for the wineries and things like that. Job costing then is much more detailed. And because the job is so big, you've got the time to actually do the admin that's putting all of your costs to a specific job. And job costing also normally gives you what is called a work in progress number. Is you sending out raw materials on site or you're building them in your own shed. It's moved from being a raw material into an incomplete finished product. And it'll give you this work in progress number as well, so that you can sort of see how much money in terms of stock you've put into this job so far. But yes, it isn't finished yet. I'm not going to go into certain details. I'm just saying that these sort of things are there. Also, with accounting systems, you can generally customize reports. You'd normally ask your consultants to do this. And I'll give you one sort of example. When we were talking about VAT, I said VAT from you as supplier is payable to your taxman in our country anyway, even though your customer hasn't paid you yet for what you sold them, if the timing happens to work out like that. And for big amounts of money, you can get yourself into big cash flow problems because the VAT, they're working on the date of the invoice, not on the money. And so what a lot of people do is you get your system, because your accounting system is automatically working out your VAT, is you get a document which in its standard format is a sales order. It's not a sales invoice. Your sequence in documents would normally be a quotation, then an order, then an invoice, and a credit note if there's something wrong. But if you get a sales order, your accounting system is not going to process through the transactions by the transaction types that were created, because it's only an order. So there's no actual transaction that's happened. But if you change the name of the sales order to a sales invoice, the piece of paper looks like it's an invoice. That's what goes through to your customer. But your system is treating it as still being an order. And so you can get your stock out of your business with a piece of paper that's saying it's an invoice, but it actually has not yet processed the invoice in your system. It's just helping you with your VAT liability. You know, as well too, is in bigger businesses, is you deliver with a delivery note in most cases, because you don't want anybody to know the prices that you've charged. But that sales order, that's called a sales invoice, if that lands up on your customer's desk, it looks a little bit more, come on, hurry up and pay me now, sort of story than just a delivery note, and they're waiting for the invoice. You've given them the invoice, even though it is actually a sales order in your system. It's only on the paper it says it's a sales invoice. Also, as a final thing, I just want to say that in your own business, is you might have a homegrown computerized system that's very specifically been created to handle the kind of business that you do. It could be the courier, like a courier business. I've personally been involved with things like this, and the courier business was what I was involved with, where they had their own system that they'd generated, so that they had a pricing system, a charging system that worked for the way that they run their business. And then you'd have to take from their system into a normal computerized accounting system. You'd have to take all of those transactions, and which in effect were all of their sales. You can do things like that as well. You need to work with people around you, that they give you the support and everything like that. You don't work with people in another country, that's for sure. Possibly within your country, if it's only an aeroplane flight. Another example of this that I've personally been involved with is in the meat business, abattoir business. Is a person had a system that broke down all the meat into the different cuts is what you should achieve. So it's a little bit more sophisticated than a manufacturing system. They'd done it in much more detail, and this was basically giving the meat processing business answers as to how much meat they should get in all the different cuts of meat from the carcasses. I'm going to leave it at this point for the moment, and I thank all of you that have subscribed for watching these videos and listening to me. I hope I've helped you. What I would like is feedback from you guys. You could possibly say to me things like, you don't feel I've covered this properly, you don't understand, whatever. Or suggestions and other things that you'd like me to cover. My intention from day one with this whole story has been to pass a bit of knowledge on to all of the people that watch these videos. Is my first intention is that it helps you in business, what I've gone through, and I hope that it makes you more money and it saves you money. I hope you put in controls with your stock and everything, and I really hope that you make more money, like I said. And the more, if you give me very interesting points to cover, I can keep on making these videos for as long as, because the more I bring in, the more information you guys are getting and new subscribers are also getting. So it benefits everybody. I will never charge anybody that's subscribed any more money for anything more that I produce. What I would like is that it brings in new subscribers. Anyway, like I said, I've quite enjoyed doing this. It's taken me quite a long time because I had to learn a few new skills. One of them was talking to a camera and setting up the videos. So it's taught me something as an old fart, I suppose. But I've quite enjoyed it, and it's